Emily had been warned not to enter the master suite. The rules were simple. Clean the West Wing stay out of the top floor and never under any circumstances open the door at the end of the hall. It belonged to him, Asher Stone, the reclusive billionaire who owned the mansion and everything in it. She had never seen him, not in person, only in scattered news articles and the occasional gossip among the staff. They spoke of his cold demeanor, his millions, and his absolute need for privacy. So that morning when she saw the door slightly ajar, her first instinct was to turn away, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the wind pushing the door just enough for her to glimpse the edge of a dark oak floor. Maybe it was the fact that no one had touched that room in weeks. Or maybe deep down it was curiosity that she couldn't silence. She stepped closer, intending only to shut the door. Her shift had just started. The hallway was empty, quiet. Her sneakers barely made a sound on the polished marble. She reached out fingers brushing the doorknob. Then she heard it. The sound of water dripping, not from a sink, from a shower. Her breath caught. Maybe someone had left it on. Maybe it was a plumbing issue. Still, she shouldn't have entered, but she did. One step inside the door closed behind her with a soft click. Her heart jumped. She turned ready to retreat, but then she froze. There, standing in front of a floor-length mirror, was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, tanned skin glistening slightly with drops of water trailing down his chest. A white towel hung low on his hips. His back was turned, but in the mirror he could see her. Their eyes met, and time stopped. Emily's breath hitched. Her entire body stiffened. She dropped the cleaning cloth in her hand. The man turned slowly, as if completely unfazed by the intrusion. His eyes were sharp, unreadable, a mixture of irritation and curiosity. He didn't cover himself. He didn't yell. He simply stepped forward. She stumbled back. "I am so sorry," she blurted, voice shaking. "I thought I didn't know. I was just—" Before she could finish, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. Her heart slammed against her ribs. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm, intentional. He stared down at her, his expression unreadable. "Didn't they teach you how to knock?" he said, voice low and even. "Or are you just that curious?" Emily's mouth opened, but no words came. Her face flushed deep red. I wasn't trying to. I didn't mean—" "You've already seen this much." He continued, voice calm but dangerous. "Might as well look me in the eye while you're at it." She yanked her wrist free, nearly tripping, as she turned and bolted for the door. Her cheeks burned. Her lungs refused to cooperate. She didn't look back, not even once. Down the stairs, through the hall, into the laundry room. Only when she reached the corner behind the linen shelves did she finally stop. She sank to the floor, buried her face in her hands, and groaned. What had she done? He was supposed to be gone. Out of town, out of the country. Why today? Why him? Why her? She was going to be fired. There was no way she would survive this. She didn't know that upstairs Asher Stone was still standing in front of the mirror, shirtless, smirking, because no one had ever dared walk in on him, and no one had ever looked more terrified or more honest. Emily James had never imagined her life would bring her to a mansion like this. The Stone estate sat on a secluded hill outside Boston, surrounded by iron gates, manicured lawns, and secrets. The kind of place you only saw in magazines or movies. She didn't belong here, not really, but life had a way of cornering people. At 22, she had already dropped out of nursing school, worked 3 jobs, and carried the weight of raising her younger brother Noah. Their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving behind nothing but debt and a stack of medical bills. Noah had been paralyzed from the waist down after a football injury, and ever since Emily had done everything she could to keep them afloat. When she saw the Maid job listing posted by a high-end agency, she applied without hesitation. The pay was decent, the hours long, but it came with housing and meals. For someone like her, it was more than a job. It was survival. The agency had been clear: follow the rules, stay invisible, do your tasks, and never step out of line. That especially applied to anything related to Mr. Asher Stone. The billionaire was never home, they said. He traveled for work, avoided the press, and disliked any kind of disruption. No one on the staff had spoken to him directly. They cleaned around his absence, maintained the estate, as though preparing for a ghost. Emily accepted all that. She didn't care who owned the house. She just wanted to work, send money home, and keep her head down. She was good at being invisible, or at least she thought she was. Until this morning. Until she walked into the one room she was told never to enter. Now her chest was tight with panic, her thoughts racing. She had made a mistake, and mistakes in places like this came with consequences. She sat on the laundry room stool, replaying everything. The mirror, his voice, the way his hand had wrapped around her wrist, the way his eyes, dark and unblinking, had stared straight through her. He didn't yell, he didn't demand an explanation. That scared her more than anything. Emily had dealt with enough angry bosses to expect shouting. Silence was worse. Silence meant calculation. Upstairs, Asher Stone buttoned his shirt slowly, his smirk fading into something more thoughtful. He hadn't expected anyone to be up that early, let alone a maid bold or clueless enough to walk into his private suite. He'd returned to the mansion last night, unannounced as always. He didn't enjoy ceremony. His staff had been trained to stay out of his way, and he liked it that way. Or at least he used to. But this girl, she had looked like a deer caught in headlights. Terrified, embarrassed, raw. He could still see the way her lips parted, searching for words that wouldn't come. The way she looked at him, not with awe or greed, but with genuine panic. She hadn't meant to see him, that much was obvious, and yet she had. And for the first time in months, maybe longer, Asher felt curious. He stepped out of the room, walked down the hallway, but she was already gone. Her footsteps had been light but hurried, like she was running from a crime scene. He didn't ask the head housekeeper who she was. He would find out himself. Emily returned to her duties an hour later, moving like a ghost, avoiding every possible hallway that might lead near the master suite. No one said anything. No one noticed the way her hands trembled slightly when she wiped down the dining table, or the way her eyes darted at every sound, as if expecting someone to come storming in and fire her on the spot. But the hours passed, and nothing happened. No reprimand, no confrontation, no call from the agency. Maybe he was too important to care. Maybe he had already forgotten her. Or maybe she thought grimly he was just waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, as the estate fell into its usual hush, Emily lay awake in her tiny room above the servants' kitchen. The window was cracked open, letting in the late autumn air. She stared at the ceiling, willing sleep to come, but it didn't. All she could see was him, the shape of him, the steam curling off his skin, the way his fingers had curled around her wrist. She turned on her side, pulled the thin blanket up to her chin and whispered to no one, "Please forget me. Please let this be nothing." But far across the house, behind thick walls and locked doors, Asher Stone was thinking of her too. Not because she had seen him undressed, but because in that one accidental moment, she had seen something he didn't know how to hide. Over the next few days, Emily avoided every hallway that led to the master suite. She changed her cleaning routes, traded tasks with other maids, and kept her head down. It became a silent strategy of survival. If she didn't see him, didn't speak to him, didn't even breathe in the direction of the forbidden wing, maybe this whole thing would blow over. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. On the fourth morning, while she was watering the plants, near the garden steps a shadow fell across the grass. Emily didn't look up. She assumed it was one of the gardeners or the cook passing by. Then a voice cut through the stillness, calm, deep, controlled. "You always this focused when you water weeds?" Her hands froze. She turned her head slowly, and there he was, Asher Stone, standing just feet away in a dark sweater sleeves, pushed to his elbows, a coffee cup in hand, as if this was a perfectly normal interaction. Her breath caught, but she straightened. "Sir, I didn't see you." "Clearly?" He looked down at the flowers, then back at her. "They're not weeds, by the way. Lavender, resilient, kind of like you." She didn't answer, unsure whether he was complimenting her or mocking her. Asher tilted his head slightly, watching her. "Relax, I'm not here to talk about the other day. Accidents happen." Emily felt a strange mix of relief and tension. His tone was casual, almost teasing, but there was something else under it. Curiosity, interest, maybe even amusement. She nodded, keeping her eyes on the soil. "Thank you, sir. I'm sorry again." "Don't apologize." He took a sip of coffee. "I should have locked the door." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, like both of them were pretending not to think about what had happened. She excused herself quickly, heart pounding, and fled to the other side of the garden. From that morning on, she noticed him more often, not because he did anything dramatic, but because he simply showed up, sitting near the fountain while she swept the path, walking past the kitchen window while she peeled vegetables, leaning on the railing as she carried linens up the back stairs. And every time their eyes met, just briefly, just long enough to stir something under her skin. One afternoon, as she was dusting the grand piano in the music room, she accidentally pressed a key. The sound echoed through the quiet room, sharp and unexpected. She flinched, then a voice behind her made her drop the duster. "Do you play?" She turned and saw him in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "No," she said quickly. "I was just cleaning." He stepped into the room, his gaze flicking to the piano. "My mother used to play," said it kept her heart soft. Emily didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure why he was telling her. He walked over and sat at the bench, letting his fingers hover above the keys. Then he played a soft melody, simple, gentle, not perfect, but filled with feeling. Emily stood frozen, watching this man, the same man who terrified her days ago, now so quiet, so oddly vulnerable. When he stopped, he didn't look at her. He just said, "Your hands aren't made for scrubbing floors." She felt her throat tighten. "They're made for survival," she said softly. He looked up, then meeting her eyes with something new, respect. He didn't say anything else, just stood and left the room, leaving her with a heart beating far too fast. Days turned into weeks. Their encounters grew in number but not in length. Always short, always subtle. A nod in the hallway. A soft smile near the garden. A joke exchanged over a misplaced mop. He never crossed a line, never asked personal questions, but Emily could feel it. A shift. He didn't treat her like a maid. He treated her like someone, like a person worth noticing. One rainy evening, the mansion lost power. Storms had knocked down a transformer nearby, plunging the house into darkness. Emily had always feared the dark. It reminded her of the night her parents died. The silence, the confusion, the way everything felt heavier without light. She lit a candle and made her way down the hall, hands trembling. A flash of lightning lit the hallway, just as thunder cracked outside, making her scream. A door opened instantly. Then footsteps, then a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She turned and saw him, Asher holding a flashlight. She nodded quickly, ashamed of her fear. "Just startled." "Come with me," he said gently. He led her to the sitting room where they lit more candles and sat on the carpet across from each other. No pretense, no pressure. Just two people stuck in a storm. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told him about Noah, about her dreams of becoming a nurse, about how she used to sing her brother to sleep when he was in too much pain to rest. He listened, really listened. Not the polite kind of listening rich people did, the kind that made her feel heard. When she asked about his life, he deflected at first, but slowly stories slipped out. About growing up in boarding schools, about always being watched, about losing his brother, his anchor to scandal and suicide. He didn't cry, but his voice cracked once. That was enough. She didn't touch him, didn't comfort him, just stayed, present. That night, as the storm faded and power returned, neither of them moved. Not until the candles burned low, and the silence between them was no longer heavy but comforting. The next morning everything was the same, but nothing felt the same. Emily hummed while folding napkins. Asher asked her to help him choose a tie for a meeting. Little things, but meaningful. The housekeeper noticed. The butler raised an eyebrow. Whispers began. Still, they never spoke of that night. They didn't need to. The connection was there, growing slowly, carefully, like something both of them were too afraid to name. One evening, as she passed by the library, he called out from inside, "You don't have to avoid me." She hesitated, then stepped inside. He was sitting by the fire, a book in his lap, looking casual, relaxed, safe. "I'm not avoiding," she said. "Just working." He nodded. "You're good at that." Then he looked up, eyes meeting hers. "But you deserve more than just working. You deserve peace." She didn't know what to say. She only knew that for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to run. She wanted to stay. In that moment, in that room, in whatever this strange, delicate thing between them was becoming. The following week unfolded with the rhythm of something unspoken, yet deeply understood. Emily continued her tasks, but her steps were lighter now, her expressions softer. She found herself humming, while wiping down railings, her fingers moving, with a gentleness that hadn't been there before. Asher noticed everything, every small change, every flicker of emotion she tried to hide. He kept his distance, but not his attention. It was always on her. He walked the hallways at times he never used, to often finding a reason to pass by wherever she happened to be. He started drinking his coffee in the rose garden near the kitchen, a place he had never cared for before. Emily would see him from a distance, seated at the stone bench, reading the paper legs crossed, calm and silent. She told herself it was coincidence, repetition, pattern, but a part of her knew it wasn't. One afternoon, while organizing the linen cabinet, she came across a book. It was wedged between two stacks of towels, hidden so carefully she almost missed it. When she opened it, a note slipped out. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just a line written in Asher's neat handwriting. You are more than where you were born. You are who you choose to become. She stared at it for a long moment, heart thudding. Was it meant for her, or was it something private she wasn't supposed to see? Either way, it felt intimate, honest, like a piece of his soul had been left behind for her to find. That night, sleep refused to come. She tossed and turned in her narrow bed, haunted by the way he had looked at her during their last conversation, like she mattered, like he saw her, and she couldn't deny it anymore. She saw him too. Not as the billionaire everyone whispered about, not as the cold, untouchable figure they warned her about, but as a man who had lost his brother, a man who played piano when no one was watching, a man who listened. The following morning she found another note. This one was tucked inside the broom closet. It read, "Sunlight suits you. Stop hiding." She bit her lip, smiling in spite of herself. It was ridiculous, immature, almost juvenile, but it warmed her in a way nothing else had in years. Later that day, Asher appeared in the kitchen just as she was rolling dough for the evening bread. The other staff gave him wide eyes and wider space. He leaned against the counter and asked casually, "Do you like cinnamon?" She nodded, unsure. "I used to love cinnamon rolls. My mother baked them when I did well in school," he said. "Would you make some?" She blinked. "For you?" "For us," he said, then walked out before she could respond. The kitchen buzzed with whispers as she prepared the rolls. She tried to focus, to remain professional, but her hands were shaking. That evening, as the scent filled the air, Asher returned. They sat in the corner of the kitchen, away from the rest, eating in silence. "You baked these," he said, taking a bite. "And I can taste the memory." She laughed softly, surprised at herself. "I didn't do anything special." "That's the magic," he replied. "You don't try, you just are." After that night, they began to speak more freely. Not long conversations, but real ones. About books, about childhood, about dreams. Emily admitted she once wanted to be a nurse. Asher listened, head-tilted, eyes steady. "Why didn't you life?" she said simply. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. One evening she found him seated in the piano room again, playing the same soft tune. He looked up when she entered. "Do you ever wish you had a different past?" he asked. "All the time," she admitted. "But maybe that's why I appreciate simple things now." "What do you appreciate most?" She hesitated. "Quiet moments and people who don't lie." He smiled a rare, full smile. "That's harder to find than you think?" She stepped closer, almost forgetting herself. Almost. "Why do you trust me?" she asked. He looked at her like the answer was obvious. "Because you've never asked for anything." That truth sat between them like a bridge. One they had built slowly, word by word, silence by silence. Asher began inviting her to walk the garden with him after sunset. They never touched, never crossed any lines. But their steps matched, and their laughter lingered longer than it should. Emily still worked, still cleaned, still cared for her brother. But now there was something else inside her. Hope. Then one day, while organizing the books in the study, she found it. A folder. Thin, neat, tucked between business files. Her name was on it. She opened it, hands trembling. Inside were documents, medical records, her brother's, and forms showing full payment of his treatment by Stone Holdings. Her breath caught. She flipped through pages, hospital approvals, therapy sessions, everything, all covered, all quietly done. She had never told Asher the full extent of Noah's care. Never asked, never hinted, and yet he had found out and helped without saying a word. She clutched the folder to her chest, overwhelmed. That evening, when she saw him near the piano room, she didn't wait. She walked straight to him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, voice shaking. He looked at her calm. "Because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. You paid for everything. I had the means, you had the heart." Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't pay you back. I don't want you to." He reached into his pocket, pulled out another folded note, and handed it to her. "You saved me before I ever saved you." She opened the note later in her room. It read, "The day you walked in, you saw me, not the man, not the money, just me. That's rare, and I won't forget it." She pressed the paper to her lips, eyes closing. It was no longer about fear, no longer about power. It was something deeper now, something real. The truth had unfolded quietly and without drama, and now there was no denying what was blooming between them. Not lust, not fantasy, but something far more dangerous: love. Whispers began to spread across the mansion like wildfire. At first they were subtle. A sideways glance in the hallway, a sudden hush when Emily entered a room. Then came the not-so-quiet comments muttered behind her back. She tried to ignore them, to bury herself in work, but it became harder each day. Someone had seen her and Asher walking in the garden. Someone else had noticed his habit of pausing when she passed. The staff began to draw conclusions, most of them cruel. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Lorne, who had always tolerated Emily's presence with distant politeness, now watched her with cold eyes. Emily overheard her once speaking to the senior butler. Girls like her always find a way to climb above their station. Innocent on the outside, ambitious underneath. Emily said nothing. She carried on scrubbing floors and folding linens, her back straight, her hands steady. But inside, the weight of their judgment bore down like bricks. She wasn't trying to seduce anyone. She hadn't asked for special treatment. She just existed. And somehow that was enough to provoke contempt. Asher noticed. He always noticed. One afternoon, after a tense dinner service, where Emily had been openly ignored by two of the servers, he pulled her aside near the courtyard. "Why do you let them talk like that?" he asked, voice low. "Because if I react, they win," she replied. "And I need this job more than I need pride." He frowned, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't have to choose between the two." She looked at him weary. "Maybe in your world, but not in mine." That night, Emily found a gift on her pillow. A pair of new shoes, comfortable and well made, to replace her worn-out pair. No note, no card, but she knew. The gesture warmed her and terrified her. She had to put space between them. She had to stop whatever this was before it spiraled beyond repair. So the next morning she requested a transfer, a quiet meeting with Mrs. Lorne, a polite explanation. She needed time away. She needed clarity. Mrs. Lorne smirked clearly, delighted. "Of course, I'll have the agency arrange it." Emily packed that night, her hands trembling, as she folded clothes into her suitcase. She left the shoes behind. She couldn't take them. It would feel too personal, too final. Asher found her in the hallway, before Dawn's suitcase in hand. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question, a fact. I need to, she whispered. This place, it's suffocating. I can make it easier, he said. I can speak to them. Fire anyone who disrespects you. She shook her head. Then they'll say I used you to get power. And if you don't let me help, they'll say you were never worth it. She looked up at him, then tears brimming. Don't you see I'm not afraid of what they think of me? I'm afraid of what this is doing to you. He stepped closer, searching her face. It's not doing anything bad. You make me better. Emily, you make me want to show up. Her voice broke. But you're not the one paying the price. He fell silent. So you're just going to disappear? No, she said. I'm choosing peace. For you. For me. For what we had. Had his voice cracked barely audible. It's not over, Asher, but it can't grow in the middle of a battlefield. He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to her. If you miss me, read this. She didn't open it. Not yet. She walked out of the estate that morning without looking back, though her heart twisted with every step. She arrived at the smaller mansion on the north side of the property, a place used for seasonal guests now vacant. Quiet, cold, but clean. There she resumed work. Fewer staff, fewer whispers, more solitude. She missed Noah, who had been transferred to a facility closer to her new location. She visited him every evening, and every night she pulled the paper from her drawer, but never opened it. Not yet. Asher, meanwhile, became a shell of himself. The mansion lost its warmth. Staff walked on eggshells. He stopped attending meetings. He barely left his study. One evening, the butler found him in the piano room, playing the same soft melody again and again. When asked if he was well, he replied, she was the only part of this house that ever felt alive. Days passed, weeks. Then one afternoon, Emily heard his voice on the radio. It was an interview recorded days prior, a rare thing for him. The host asked about family legacy love, and Asher said money can buy silence, but not connection. The only person who ever really saw me walked into my life by accident and changed everything. Emily sat frozen in her room, the radio buzzing. It was the first time he had acknowledged her beyond the estate. Openly, publicly. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter. Inside were 7 words. This house was never home without you. The next morning, Asher stood at the kitchen door of the smaller mansion. No driver, no assistant, just him. Can we talk? He asked. Emily nodded, too stunned to speak. They walked to the garden bench behind the house. He spoke first. You left because you were trying to protect me. But all I wanted was to protect you. It wasn't about safety, she whispered. It was about worth. I needed to know I was more than a rumor. You are. He reached out, took her hand. You are the only thing that's ever made sense in this place. And what if I still feel like I don't belong? Then let's build a place where you do. She closed her eyes, the pain in her chest loosening. One step at a time, she said. No hiding, he promised. They sat together until the sky turned gold, until silence became peace. No longer enemies of circumstance, but allies in something they could no longer deny. Love. They returned to the main estate quietly without ceremony. Emily walked through the grand front doors with her chin high and shoulders straight. The same hallways that once made her feel invisible now felt different. Not because she held power, but because she had finally reclaimed her place, not just in the mansion, but in her own story. The staff stared, some nodded, some whispered, a few turned away. But Asher didn't flinch, didn't slow down, and didn't release her hand until they reached the sitting room, where they parted with a simple glance. That evening she resumed her duties. She folded linens, polished the glass cabinets, and set the table as she always had. But there was a shift in how she moved. Not smaller, not louder, just steadier. She was no longer afraid of being seen. Asher didn't interfere. He gave her space, but always noticed her. A flower left on her tray, a smile across the hall, a quiet hello in the morning. He never crossed a line. Their conversations resumed slowly, casual yet layered with history. They laughed about broken faucets. They teased about her old scribbled to-do lists. She told him stories about Noah's progress, about how he was learning to use a voice-activated wheelchair, and Asher listened like it was the most important news he had heard all week. Then came the visitor, Clara. She arrived in the middle of a sunny afternoon, with pearl earrings and a posture too perfect to be natural. An old friend of the family, she claimed, a socialite, sharp, elegant, the kind of woman who never missed a headline. She toured the estate as if inspecting it. When she met Emily in the hallway, she stopped, gave a tight smile, and said, "So this is the Maid who's managed to become the most whispered name in Boston's high society." Emily said nothing. She didn't need to. The woman's voice dripped with dismissal. "It's charming," Clara added, her tone anything but. "Your simplicity. It must be exhausting pretending not to care what people think." Emily turned away, but the words lingered. That evening, Clara and Asher dined in the formal hall. Emily served. She placed the dishes, poured. The wine kept her gaze low. But Clara didn't miss the tension. She leaned closer to Asher at one point and said loud enough for Emily to hear, "Darling, be careful where you invest your attention. Pretty things break easily." Asher's jaw clenched. "She's not a thing, and she's not yours to evaluate." Clara smiled. "I see. So this is real. More real than anything I've ever had." Emily's hand tightened around the wine bottle, but she didn't look up. Clara left 2 days later, but not before leaving behind a trail of fresh rumors. Social media buzzed, blogs speculated, photographers appeared outside the estate gates. The Billionaire and the Maid. That was the headline. And the fallout was immediate. Staff tiptoed around her. Invitations to events stopped arriving. Old friends of Asher's began sending cool, calculated messages. He ignored most of them, but Emily didn't. She felt it in every glance, every pause in conversation. One morning, as she prepared the breakfast tray, she caught her reflection in the silver teapot. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders slumped. She felt like a shadow in her own life. That night she found Asher in the garden pacing. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He turned. "Doing what fighting battles I never asked you to fight." He walked closer, his expression unreadable. "Because I don't care what they think. I care what you feel, and I feel like a burden. You're not. Then why does it hurt so much to be here?" He paused, then said softly, "Because you're trying to survive in a house that wasn't built for love." She stared at him, the truth of his words landing like a punch. "Then maybe I need to build my own." He nodded slowly. "And I'll help you, but not by hiding you, not by pretending this is less than what it is." She swallowed hard. "Are you sure? Because once you say it out loud, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure." The next morning they ate breakfast together in the open dining room, not in secret, not behind closed doors. The staff watched in stunned silence as Emily placed her plate beside his, and he poured her tea without blinking. Some frowned, some smiled. No one said a word. But the message was clear. Asher Stone had made a choice. Later that week, Emily faced the final test. Mrs. Lorne summoned her to the West Wing storage room, a place rarely used. When Emily arrived, she found the room filled with bags of laundry, all unwashed. "This needs to be done by tonight," Mrs. Lorne said, her tone clipped. Emily looked at the pile, then back at the woman. "Why me? Because you need reminding. You still work here, no matter who notices you." Emily said nothing. She rolled up her sleeves and began washing. Hours passed. Her hands blistered. Her back ached. But she didn't stop. She didn't complain. When Asher found her there, kneeling beside a pile of soaked linens, he said nothing at first, just stared. Then he knelt beside her and took her hands gently in his. "Who did this? It doesn't matter. It does." He stood, eyes dark. The next morning, Mrs. Lorne was gone. Dismissed. No public reason. Just a quiet suitcase packed and a ride waiting at the gate. When Emily asked why, Asher said, "Because I don't keep people in my life who try to dim the light I care about most." Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. That night, he walked her to the piano room, a place they had once shared silence. He played again, the same melody from months before. "Do you remember this?" he asked. "Every note. This reminds me of you." "Why?" "Because it's quiet, honest, and impossible to forget." She sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. "So what happens next?" she whispered. He turned to her eyes steady. "We stop surviving and we start living." She didn't answer. She just leaned into him, the final wall between them crumbling at last. Love didn't have to scream. Sometimes it whispered. And this was a promise, whispered loud enough to last forever. The weeks that followed were not perfect, but they were theirs. Emily continued to work part-time in the estate, not because she had to, but because she chose to. She liked the rhythm of ordinary tasks, the feel of folded linens, the scent of fresh bread. Asher respected that. He never tried to take her out of the life she had built. Instead, he stepped into it with her, quietly, gently, fully. They shared dinners in the garden when the weather allowed, long walks through the orchard, behind the estate, and soft music in the piano room. Their love did not require grand declarations. It existed in the everyday steady reel and grounding. One afternoon, Asher led Emily to a small path she had never noticed before, lined with low-hanging trees and soft earth. At the end of it stood a cottage, simple, beautiful, a home tucked away from the world. "I started building this the week you left," he said. "I didn't know if you'd ever see it, but I had to believe you might." Emily stepped inside. Wooden beams, warm walls, a small kitchen, a window seat overlooking the meadow. It was everything she never dared to dream of. "This is yours," he said, voice quiet. "No staff, no roles. Just space for you to breathe, for us to grow." She looked around, her throat tight with emotion. "No one's ever built anything for me before." He stepped closer, gently brushing her hair from her face. "Then let this be the first of many things." That night they sat on the porch of the cottage, wrapped in a blanket, watching stars blink across the sky. The air smelled like lavender and promise. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I never thought love would look like this." Asher kissed her temple and said, "That's because this isn't just love, it's home." They didn't need a wedding to prove their commitment. They didn't invite the world to approve it. They chose each other over rumors, over judgment, over fear, slowly, deliberately. And every day they continued choosing, Emily began mentoring the younger maids, reminding them that they were not just their uniforms. She spoke gently, moved with grace, and showed by example that dignity was not about status but self-worth. One morning, a shy new housekeeper asked her, "How did you get him to see you?" Emily smiled and replied, "I didn't try to be seen. I just stayed true. That was the magic. Not strategy, not manipulation, but truth, raw and unfiltered." Emily's love for Asher was not about wealth or power. It was about presence. His love for her was not about rescue or romance. It was about respect. As seasons changed, so did the estate. The energy softened. People smiled more. Asher smiled more. He laughed without restraint. He played piano without hiding. And every note he played told the story of the maid who walked in without knocking and stayed long enough to be loved as she was. Because in the end, the greatest love stories are not born from perfection, but from persistence. Two people choosing each other even when the world says they shouldn't. Especially when the world says they shouldn't. And if you ever pass by the stone estate, you might hear the soft hum of music, floating from the cottage at the edge of the trees. A reminder that real love doesn't need permission. It only needs truth.